Like I said, why would the team on the top want the team on the bottom to move up? Or any other team ranked second, third, or fourth? Just as long as you're not on the bottom. And just like in sports, when you go and compete, you feel more confident when you go against a bottom-ranked team. And sometimes, you'll let them know that. I guess since every other team is doing financially better, there's not a problem. They don't want to replace the team on the bottom, so it's better to stay compartmentalized on the bottom. Suspected of stealing because black people are financially on the bottom. Suspected of violence because black people are angry about being financially on the bottom. What about bottom non-privileges? The reason you can't date my daughter, can't live next door to me, can't be a part of the management executive team, stay on the production floor, and don't think, just do simple physical labor, can't go to our event, can't get on our boat, can't get a membership to our club, can't compete in our sport, can't represent our community. All because they can't get a loan, can't get credit, can't get a grant, can't get a privileged favor. And black people don't manufacture cars, don't manufacture trucks, planes, or spaceships. Don't own an NFL team, don't own popular cryptocurrency, don't go looking for sunken treasure, and on. So, every time you look at the problems of the black race, you always have to look at the infrastructure of greed first. The only other group of people with less wealth than black people in the US, as a group including any race, are homeless people. Think about it. The United States is the greediest, richest country in the world. And I don't know which country is really the poorest in the world, but I guarantee you, I know the color of their race. So, the richest country, poorest citizens are homeless. Probably on the same block as a 5-star premium condo. So what happens if a billionaire meets a homeless person on the street? One has a whole lot of valuable material to lose, plus people around the billionaire who care, mostly likely because of the money. But it can be love too. The other doesn't have any material worth trading for real value to lose but his homeless possessions that you couldn't trade for money. One would love to engage in conversation. The other one, most likely, would like to avoid any engagement or de-escalate the scene with pure silence, no eye contact, eager to leave the scene quietly, quickly. You factor in health, time, disrespect, mental illness, possible abuse or bully during their overall life. And the homeless, or the new word unhoused people, might not respect your presence that well, from their very bottom perspective viewpoint. Disrespect, from the one with less to lose, because they have less to lose, and may not care about their future and their lives. Tired and jealous of their overall life, that they live 24 hours a day, every day. Not as worried as the billionaire about jail time or punishment. Cause for one, in a jail cell, they get 3 meals a day, and other free resources, and of course air, water, food, shelter and clothing to live and stay warm. And without money to fine or sanction the unhoused person, the penal system can't retrieve compensation for jailing the unhoused person. Two people on the opposite side of the spectrum of greed. An unhoused person can be unhoused for a number of reasons. Mental health, illness, and injury. Runaway, kicked out of their home, on the run. Bad employment opportunities, or a very bad investment move. But when it comes to African Americans, and other minorities, it's just bad color. Air, water, food, shelter, and clothing for warmth to survive. And we actually wore less clothing the further you go back in human history, because our bodies were hairier and rougher. But when it comes to air, which race is most likely to live near toxic air, like factories, oil refineries, in Cancer Alley in Louisiana? When it comes to water, which cities are known for polluted water? Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi, in places where a lot of African Americans live. When it comes to food, a lot of cheap food is ultra-processed, with extra salt and extra sugar, since it's harder to afford everyday salads and organic health fast food. African Americans consume more, to become the leader in heart attacks and blood pressure. This can come from a broken-down grocery store, or a fast food restaurant, both with sanitary issues, instead of a real restaurant. What about shelter? African Americans are most likely to stay in poor, broken-down apartment buildings, infested with toxic mold and disease-carrying insects and rodents. Or houses with the same issues, if they can afford one. And they could be located in the most undesirable areas to live, like near toxic factories or just industrial neighborhoods. Also, low-lying areas that are easy to flood as opposed to higher safer land with better views too. And don't forget about noisy airports. Clothing is something that's not consumable, not too expensive, and more personalized as an individual. So, minorities, especially African Americans, try to look richer when it comes to clothing. Try to look flyer when we take a cheap car and make it look flashy, even though society sees us still on the financial bottom. Bottom compartmentalization. Living in a cheap ghetto neighborhood, going to a cheap, broken down school with little to no resources, then ending up getting a cheap minimum wage job to make enough money to go to a cheap, discounted dollar store and bring it back to your cheap ghetto hood. That's why if cops had to decide, was it the black or the white guy who was the thief, they would most likely choose the black guy, because of the financial bottom. He is perceived as poor and need to steal, or likely to respond violently, which also means more likely to be gunned down, because the officer feared for their lives. Murders of young black on black men like in cities, like Chicago, is okay for some people, because they consider that bottom financial waste that needs to be swept under the rug and forgot about. Yeah. One team has to be financially on the bottom of greed.